The other day, I was having a fun little conversation on Discord with someone that brought up something that I really want to talk about in this video. Now, his main specific example he was giving was this 25 Weatherby RPM, and he was comparing it to a 25 Creedmoor. And basically what he was saying is the 25 Weatherby RPM is extremely inefficient. That at best, you might get 200, maybe 250 feet per second more with the 25 RPM than a 25 Creedmoor while burning 40% more powder. And my response was, yeah, you got to pay to play with Magnums. And here's what I said. There is no such thing as an efficient Magnum. This is a 308 Winchester. I believe it is the epitome of efficiency. And when you put this in a 24-inch or even a 26-inch barrel, it is basically impossible to beat as far as efficiency goes. And I'm going to show you that today. Now, when you want to step up your performance from a 308 Winchester, let's say you're going to go out west and hunt elk. A lot would choose a 30-06, but I would say the vast majority would step up to the big 300 Winchester Magnum. And let me tell you, the efficiency goes down the tank when you go up to a 300 Winchester Magnum. All right, we've pulled up Gordon's reloading tool. I've put in 308 Winchester. You know, we're going to use a common hunting bullet in 308 Winchester. We're going to use like a 165 grain bullet. We're going to do the exact same thing for the 300 Win Mag. And what Gordon's reloading tool is really good at is giving you a good estimated top velocity. So a top velocity with a 24-inch barrel, bear in mind, is going to be probably around 28-40 feet per second with a 165 grain bullet. Again, really, really efficient. Now let's go to the 300 Winchester Magnum. Now, to make things as fair as possible, I'm going to use the exact same bullet. I'm actually going to use the exact same barrel. Now, I would say most 300 Win Mag barrels are probably 26, but a lot are going to be in the 24-inch as well. Using the exact same bullet, we are topping out at 3,200 feet per second. So the 300 Win Mag is going to give you roughly 360 feet per second more than a 308 Winchester, but you're also burning probably around 72.5 grains of powder versus 45 grains of powder. That's a lot more for 360 feet per second. Now, as we go down in caliber, smaller caliber, the efficiency gets even worse. So let's do our next example. We have the little efficient, fun 7mm 08 and the current king of Magnums 7 PRC. Now, when the 7 PRC first came out, I heard all sorts of talk about how efficient this Magnum is. Well, no. Okay, we've got 7mm 08 pulled up with a 24-inch barrel. Again, this is going to have the exact same barrel length as a 7 PRC. Now, I understand that the vast majority of people are not going to be shooting this heavy of a bullet, but I did pick the 175 grain ELDX, and then this is a rough estimate. Take that with a grain of salt. We're roughly maybe 42 grains of powder, and then max velocity, we're probably 2665, maybe 2670 feet per second. It's not too shabby out of this little cartridge. Now we go to 7 PRC. Again, 24-inch barrel, same exact bullet, using really good powder. We are topping out, look at that, almost 3,000 feet per second. You'd probably say 2993, maybe 2995 at 65,000 PSI. All right, so this 7 PRC is 325 feet per second faster than a 7mm 08. But the 7mm 08 is using 42 grains of powder, while the 7 PRC is using basically 68.5 grains. Now I want to give you one more example. We're going to look at the most hated cartridge of all time. Yeah, that's the 6.5 Creedmoor right here. A cartridge that's just extremely popular. Many YouTube influencers are calling it the best do-it-all cartridge for hunting. That is the 6.5 PRC. And a lot of people would just make a big assumption like, oh, the 6.5 PRC is very efficient. You're just getting great performance for how much powder you're using. Are we sure about that? All right, we've got the 6.5 Creedmoor pulled up in GRT. Of course, we're using a 24-inch barrel. We're going to use the 143 ELDX. And we're going to use N550. Great powder for velocity for 6.5 Creedmoor. All right, let's just go straight to the point. Yeah, you're going to get 28.55 feet per second in a 24-inch barrel with a 143. It's really not too shabby at all. Now, let's go to the 6.5 PRC, same barrel length, 24 inches, same bullet. We're going to use Weatherby N560, and you're going to max out at 3,040 feet per second. The 6.5 PRC is not as overbore as a 7 PRC or a 300 Win Mag. However, it's not as efficient as you might think it would be. To get over 3,000 feet per second, you're going to be using 57 grains of powder. Now, if we go back to the 6.5 Creedmoor, we're using about 42.5 grains of powder to get 2850. To get 150 feet per second more, you're burning 15 more grains of powder. That's not that good. All right, just to give you an overall view of just how inefficient Magnums really are compared to your standard length cartridges like 308 Win, 7mm 08, and 6.5 Creedmoor. All right, so here we go. Again, 165 grain bullet, topping out at 2840 feet per second, 24-inch barrel, roughly around 45 grains of powder, 300 Win Mag. You're going to get 3,200 feet per second with a 24-inch barrel. Then you're going to be using 72 grains of powder, maybe a little more depending on the powder. That, my friends, is 60% more powder to get 360 feet per second. Now, when I talk about the importance of using a long barrel in a Magnum, 26 inches, you're going to get 50 more feet per second. So now suddenly you are over 400 feet per second faster than a 308 Winchester with 60% more powder. Yeah, stop using the short barrels, guys. Now, I did say the smaller the caliber you go, the worse it gets. So 7mm 08 with a 175 grain bullet, 24-inch barrel, 2,670 feet per second with roughly around 42 grains of powder, 7 PRC. Topping out 2995 feet per second with 68.5, maybe 69 grains of powder. And there is a 325 feet per second difference with the same barrel length. But now you are using 63% more powder in the 7 PRC. Now finally, 6.5 Creed versus a 6.5 PRC with the 143 grain, both 24-inch barrels. You're getting 2855 feet per second with roughly around 42.5 grains of powder. Then the 6.5 PRC, you're getting 3,040 feet per second with 57.5 grains of powder. And again, you know, at most you're going to get a little under 200 feet per second more. So 185, and you are burning 35% more powder. Basically, to get 200 feet per second faster than a 6.5 Creedmoor, when you step up to 6.5 PRC, you are burning 15 more grains of powder. Now let me go on a little bit of a rant. The trend is to get these so-called efficient Magnums and to put really short barrels on them. So it's much more manageable to use a suppressor. So I've seen plenty of 6.5 PRCs with 22-inch barrels and even 20-inch barrels. And guys, this is especially bad with factory ammo because usually factory ammo is not getting box velocity anyway. And then when you cut your barrel 4 inches to make it more manageable for a suppressor, I'm going to show you what kind of velocity you're going to be getting with your 6.5 PRC. All right, we're back to GRT and our baseline, okay? 6.5 Creedmoor, 2855 feet per second with a 143 grain. All right, now let's go to 6.5 PRC. And let's just say instead of a 24-inch barrel, you cut it down to 22, which I'd probably say a lot of 6.5 PRCs are 22-inch barrels. Now this is hand loading it. you're maxing out at 2968 feet per second. So now you're within almost 110 feet per second of a 6.5 Creedmoor. Now the trend is really short barrels, a 20-inch barrel. Oof. Maxing out, bear in mind, hand loads at 2,888 feet per second. We are now only a little over 30 feet per second faster than a 6.5 Creedmoor. And that is maxing out your velocity. This isn't factory ammo. I've seen factory ammo in 6.5 PRC with a short barrel, and it's not even getting 6.5 Creedmoor velocities. So now you're burning 15 extra grains of powder to maybe match a 6.5 Creedmoor? Talk about insanity. Now, the point of this video is just, well, it's not to steer you away from Magnums. Myself, as a Magnum lover, will always recommend a Magnum. But you just kind of got to know what you're getting into, especially if you hand load it. You got to pay to play to get that velocity you really want. Moral of the story, if you're getting a Magnum, 26-inch barrel minimum.